Hello and welcome to the MRI Network podcast. I'm Patrick Convery, Director of Media with MRI. Joining us today are two leaders from Gibson Consultants in Wilmington, North Carolina. First, I'd like to introduce Jim Gibson, President, followed by Colin Dittus, VP of Consulting. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Patrick.
Patrick, always great to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing well, Colin. Thank you. I am really excited to speak with both of you today to learn more about your consulting division, which specializes in contract and interim solutions. Before we dive into that area, Jim, could you provide us with a kind of high-level overview of your firm and the industries in which your team specializes?
Sure. We specialize in healthcare only. We're a boutique firm. We've been in business for 20 years. We were started in 2002. And specifically, there are two buckets that we do most of our work in. One is the health plan market, companies ranging from large blue plans down to startups. And we also do a lot of work in what's called the digital health market. Sometimes it's called health information technology. It goes by different names, but it's essentially companies, tech-enabled service companies, some BPO companies. So we have those two buckets, and over time, the lines between the two have been blurring. But that's where we focus. And the reason that we focus on those two things is, since I started the firm, those are the areas that I knew. In the first part of my career, I worked on the health plan side, and then I did a shift and got into the software side. I sold software and managed software sales teams and product management. So they were two areas that I knew well, and I figured if we're going to be doing recruiting, we might as well go into a domain that we understand.
And what types of roles are you placing within these organizations?
In the digital health companies, we're usually working at the C-level across the functions. Sometimes those are VPs rather than C titles, but basically the department heads across the functions. And then there are a couple of functional areas that we go up and down from the chief level down to, let's call it a director level. And that would be product management and also sales. And on the health plan side, we're mid to senior management. And we also have a deep vertical presence in risk adjustment as well as clinical leadership. But on the health plan side, those are bigger companies typically, and they've got a lot of different types of positions. They don't always fall neatly into a discipline or a bucket.
Okay, thanks, Jim. And Colin, I know you are driving the interim and consulting solutions for Gibson. Are your efforts more focused in the health plan space or the digital health space?
Both. There's heavy usage of flexible talent, of consulting, contractors, interim talent, both within the health plan and the digital health spaces. We're seeing it a little bit more heavy on the digital health space just because there tends to be a little bit more change there. And where change happens, you tend to see a lot more need for consulting support, just given the fluidity of those businesses.
Colin, when we look at the market today, especially within these two verticals, why is it so important for organizations that are looking to grow, looking to build their teams within the healthcare space? Why is it so important for them to work with a search firm that offers both traditional permanent placement talent solutions and more flexible talent solutions like the ones you and your team offer?
They're both great offerings, Patrick, and there's a time and a place for both. The market is really driving this, right? There are several reasons why companies should consider using flexible talent. Hiring doesn't have to be a binary decision, yes or no, especially when you look at companies as they're ramping up. They don't have endless budgets to go and hire at will for every function that they may need that may be beneficial to the organization. So consulting gives them, in many cases, the ability to start to engage talent at a level that makes sense for their business, whether that's a fractional hire, an expert that is putting in part of their time to that organization, whether that is an interim leader, somebody that is helping an organization to start up a function with the ultimate plan of laying out success and building that out for the ultimate successor. Either way, though, what that does is allows the organization to take a fixed cost, human capital, and turn it into a variable cost and ebb and flow the cost of those services as they need and as their business needs dictate.
When you approach organizations and their hiring managers and their leadership teams, or the individual talent that you're looking to place, when you approach them with these, call them flexible talent solutions, whether it's interim or a fractional opportunity, what is some of the common resistance that you receive? What are their concerns? And what would you like to help alleviate through our conversation today?
A lot of that is level specific, right? If you're talking about an individual contributor at the director level, an organization often doesn't have awareness that they can hire a strongly skilled person at that level because the companies that they've worked for in the past just haven't used that model. It is very much out there, though. There is a growing presence of firms that can provide highly specialized skill sets in a manner that is flexible to the client company, whether that's a contractor, a consultant. And a lot of the resistance at senior levels is not necessarily using an advisor because companies are quite familiar with that model. The gap tends to come a little bit more from the standpoint of them not knowing that they can utilize a service like ours to help them with those needs. And you do see a lot of fragmentation there. It's a very disjointed process, but companies that are engaging a senior level consultant, whether that's an interim leader, an advisor, a fractional hire, they tend to use people from their own network, people that are known to them already. And given that model, they don't have a lot of selectivity. They don't have options to choose from. It's the few people that they know. And obviously, when you're in a situation like that, you don't always have every one of those individuals with the right availability that lines up with timing and the needs of the organization. What we bring to the table is a 20-year database of talent, of relationships, of really knowing what good looks like in each of those functional areas where we have expertise. And we've pre-vetted in many times a lot of the talent that is willing and able to work in a consulting or fractional capacity. And so what we can do with that is go back to the client and offer them somebody that not only meets the skill set and experience that they need, but also all of the intangibles that are important to them. And that's really critical, especially when you look at small startup company culture. The impact there can really be quite strong. And in many cases, also by doing that, by giving them options, we're able to give them different price points that work for them, not necessarily just the premium consulting rates that you'll see out of a lot of boutique consulting companies that may be very good, but don't quite have the flexibility in their cost structure that we do.
So we covered the client, the organizational side of it. What are some of the advantages for the individuals to go ahead and accept a role as an interim worker or as a consultant?
Where to start, because the advantages really are many. And they're different for each person, but a lot of them boil down to flexibility, boil down to lifestyle. In many cases, a person is tired of having been burned out working in the corporate world where they're working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. In a consulting capacity, they're paid for the time that they work, right? So there will be those weeks where it's crunch time and they need to be all hands on deck and work around the clock, but they don't typically experience a lot of the same sort of corporate pressures, the red tape, a lot of the things that typically cause those in corporate America to burn out. A consultant doesn't have those same pressures. They can really pick and choose the projects that are most comfortable to them. They really get to focus more on the work, less on a lot of the other facets of employment that aren't as appealing to them.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin. And in a few moments, I will ask Jim to chime in to explain why these flexible talent solutions are such a great fit for healthcare startups that are VC backed. But before we do that, I do want to continue to focus on some of the foundational elements, Colin, because the three of us, we work in the staffing and recruiting industry. However, I realize the majority of our audience may not be as familiar with the various models and offerings that are available. So, Colin, do me a favor. We've thrown a lot of terms around so far, whether it's interim, consulting, contract, fractional. Can you define these various offerings or work models?
There's not well-defined sort of consistent definitions across industries. Broadly, though, when we talk about them, an interim leader is a person that a company hires that's generally devoting most or even all of their time to that one organization. They're working for a fairly finite period of time, not forever. They're working to do a few things. Number one, day-to-day execution, the things that have to get done near term. Just as important, though, they're really laying the groundwork for success for the ultimate person that's going to be hired and become their successor, the full-time employee. So that's tends to be an interim hire. Usually it's leadership level. A fractional hire is really another way of saying part-time, but tends to be a very highly specialized, experienced senior level part-time hire. And a fractional hire is basically somebody that devotes a portion of their time. It could be 1 or 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week to the given organization. And that comes in handy for typically a Series A or even pre-Series A company, maybe Series B, where they have a really specific need, but they can't yet justify hiring the person full time and paying the full salary and the full benefits package, back end bonuses, et cetera. So it's really a way of getting a portion of a person's expertise. And then you have a consultant is somebody that is spending any certain percentage of their time on behalf of an organization. And it's their subject matter expertise. And it's tends to be picked to a project or even a couple of projects. So it's a way of gaining expertise at a very senior level, not necessarily very senior level, but a very experienced level. And then you have, last but not least, a contractor. And that tends to be somebody that is using both their experience, but also doing.
Colin, tell me if you've ever ran into this scenario. You have a fractional opportunity for a senior level individual who is intrigued by the project. However, they're in need of full-time employment. How do you navigate that situation?
Great question. It's a lot of people are really intrigued by the model. They'd love to go out and focus their time and be able to really share their expertise across a number of companies instead of just being devoted to one full-time organization. But the tricky part is, just as you pointed out, making sure that they're staying busy and working as much as they want to be working. Where we come in is we've got a very broad base of clients that we've developed over 20 years. So we can work with the consultant, with the hire, to augment their bandwidth. If they have one project on their own, we can add a second or a third, or if we're placing them for the first time and it's a fractional role, again, we can work with them to really keep them as busy as they want, as long as their skill set is fairly in demand, which it tends to be in the areas that we work in.
You know, so many people are familiar with the concept of a talent agent in show business and in professional sports, but this sounds no different. It sounds like you act truly as a talent agent for those individuals working throughout the healthcare industry. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I would say we very much are. And we see that trend as a whole, that the talent space, recruiters, the best recruiters are really becoming delivery agnostic. And what I mean by that is instead of focusing on one delivery model, i.e., full-time, retained, permanent search, companies' needs tend to be more fluid than that. So rather than just focusing on that one mechanism, we focus all of our time and attention on developing relationships with the talent in our particular niche areas. And we can deliver those people in any mechanism that the company may need, whether it's a full-time role, whether it's an interim leader, whether it's a fractional hire or a consultant. The focal point for us is knowing what good looks like, right? Knowing who the talent is, especially in the world of fractional and interim and consulting, being able to deliver that talent in a moment's notice, because we don't have weeks and months as you do with a typical retained search to show up with the right resource. Startup companies have very dynamic needs and they need to be addressed now. So the power that we have is we've already, in most cases, pre-qualified, pre-vetted a lot of this talent, and we can deliver this talent in whatever modality the company needs at that moment in time.
You just mentioned how time is of the essence and how speed to placement is one of the greatest benefits of utilizing these flexible talent solutions. Can you provide a high level overview of the process, the search process, and what enables you to deliver talent so quickly? And then additionally, I'm curious if I am one of these industry leaders, but I'm working in a traditional permanent role within my organization, but I'm ready to explore new opportunities. Now you have my attention. I'm ready to maybe try a fractional role or to come in as a consultant or as an interim employee. How do I signal that I'm open to that? How do I start having conversations with people like you and your team? And how do I make that transition from perm to interim or to a consulting role? And how do we do it quickly?
I'll start by saying it's in the consulting and interim world, it's not often that we're in what I'd call purely reactive search mode, i.e., a company defines a need for us, and then we have to go out from start from scratch and find the person that has the right skills, background, experience, but also logistically has everything to line up in terms of their availability, their location, all of those other things. So yeah, we very much do what we call recruiting ahead of the need, which is another way of saying that we like to understand professionals in our space, in our niche area. So there certainly has to be a clearly aligned skill set, and it doesn't work for everybody. But the people in, for example, healthcare product management, people with really strong experience in digital health companies, or even those on the payer side, um, they have strong skills to leverage. We'd really very much like to get to know them, right? Whether that's for consideration for full-time needs or for consulting or interim or fractional roles. And generally what we'll do is we'll have a conversation, an introductory conversation that really only takes 30 minutes or so to fully understand the individual, what they've accomplished in their career, what their background and skills look like, and just as importantly, what they're passionate about, because when you find what someone's passion is, it's a lot easier to align really well fit roles that are going to best leverage their experience and get them excited to go to work on behalf of a company that has clearly defined needs at a very important critical time in their ramp up. We'll have that conversation to get to know them, and then based on that, we'll keep them top of mind and stay in regular conversation. And as we develop the right project with the right organization where there's good alignment, we'll reach out and share some details and then get them in the process.
Yeah, this is a really interesting model, and I can't even imagine what Gibson Consultants' talent database looks like after following this process and having these conversations and growing your network for the last 20 years. That's got to be a confidence booster for you and for the organizations that you pitch your services to. Colin, thank you so much. Now that we have a really in depth overview of the various talent solutions and the benefits both to employers and employees who utilize flexible talent solutions, I do want to toss it over to Jim Gibson. Jim, earlier you had shared that you work with a lot of startups in the healthcare space and that these startups are VC backed. Can you explain why these flexible talent solutions are such a great fit for that type of business model?
Sure. Actually, when you think about the health plan market, if you had them ranked in terms of size, it's the bottom end of that scale that are the startups, maybe obviously. And so they might be a startup plan with a single line of business, maybe Medicare, or they might be focused on Medicaid. But that's where the startups are on the health plan side. On the digital health side, I would say 95% of the market is what we're calling startups. And a startup could be a 7-year-old company. But startups are generally, or the digital health companies are generally small companies. They're entrepreneurial, they're very fluid environments. If you take the end of the bell curve, you take the largest companies out of it, maybe the top 100 companies, you're probably left with over 3,000 companies that have between 50 and 150, 175 employees. So real small company environment. Most of them are funded by either venture capitalists or private equity firms. And those that aren't are usually hoping to get to that point. It's pretty rare that a company is able to grow successfully just using the capital that comes in as revenue for selling its product or service. Usually, you have a window of opportunity in the market, and you want to capitalize on that as quickly as you can before the window closes. And in order to do that, you need to get outside capital to enable you to hire certain types of people, to invest in certain types of infrastructure. Again, if you relied on your own revenue coming in the door, you might miss the opportunity. And so that's why these small, rapidly growing companies go to outside investors. The venture capitalists tend to get in on the earlier stages of a company's life cycle. The private equity firms get in a little bit later. The funding follows fairly predictable. It's a fairly predictable stair-step approach. So when somebody gets an idea and they think they might have something that could be a viable company, a viable product, they might go out and raise, who knows, 150,000, 200,000, so some sum of money from their friends and family, and lo and behold, that funding round is called the friends and family round. Alternatively, they could go to something of an institutional investor that does this as more than a hobby, but those people are investing in the very, very early stage, and that's called seed funding. And again, it's evocative of what's going on here. Let me put a little money in and see if my investment grows. Once they start to have some success and they start to realize that they have achieved proof of concept, yes, this thing addresses a real need, and there are potential buyers that will spend money for this solution to address that need. And then at that point, the next step in the funding evolution is the Series A round. Again, that more often than not, that's venture capital, and it's usually a combination of a few venture capital firms that go in together. And that could be $3 million, it could be $10 million, it could be virtually any amount, but it's money that's geared towards, let's get this going, let's get this cranking, let's hire some engineers, let's hire somebody to sell, let's get an office, let's get some office equipment, let's maybe do some kind of marketing, a website or something. Let's just get this to look like it's a professional outfit and grow it as far as we can, as fast as we can. After that, the board, which includes those investors and the CEO of the company, is looking at, where do we go from here? How do we get to the next step? And the next step, as you'd guess, would be the Series B round of investment. And again, that could be more venture capital, or it could be private equity money. And that's usually a larger amount, and that's to get us to the next level. So it's usually a bigger investment. And it goes like that. The Series A, Series B, C, D. Sometimes you hear about Series E. Most companies are A, B, maybe C. But if you think about that stair-step approach to the funding, the operational needs of the organization don't go that way. They do not go on a stair-step approach. They're more of a gradual incline. Put it a different way, the operational needs or the staffing needs precede the funding that's put into the company. So if I'm approaching my Series A and I'm almost ready for prime time, or if I've gotten my Series A, I've gotten a few $1 million, but that money's going to go quick, I might not be willing to, or feel it appropriate to go out and hire on a full-time basis a CFO. But I do need to get my financial house in order so that I can scale the company and I can make it through the Series A or to the Series B. And so that's a good example of where thing comes in place. I could have somebody, whether it's an interim CFO for 6 months, just to get all our systems in place and get our filings all set up, or I could have a fractional CFO that gives me 1 or 2 days a week for 9 months. It's a perfect scenario for tapping into the high-end talent pool that I'd never be able to do if I had to commit to a full-time hire with benefits and all that implies. Another example might be in those early stages, I might hire a head of sales and marketing. Fairly common, but almost always that's head of sales and marketing is a salesperson. That person knows sales, knows how to get a sales operation going, how to build a team when the time is appropriate, how to close deals. The focus is sales. That person rarely has grown up understanding strategic marketing. And so he or she might know, yeah, let's go to these trade shows and let's participate in this blog and that kind of a thing. But that's just tactical stuff. That's not the real marketing that a growing business that wants to scale needs. And so that's another example, just one more, the type of organization that could benefit from bringing in a consultant on some sort of interim basis to get the expertise into the operation and get them moving on the scale.
Jim, if we could go back to the various stages of funding that you explained earlier, what is a typical timeline moving from Series A to Series B and so forth?
It's hard to say how long that's going to take. It's funny because when we talk to executives that are doing this for the first time, they're always surprised at how long it takes to actually get that Series A pulled together. They always think it's going to happen sooner than it is. And that's is just a testament to the due diligence of the investors. They do this for a living, so they're going to be careful. But to go from Series A to Series B, some companies do it in 18 months. Some companies take 3 years. There's really no rule of thumb. But one thing to keep in mind is when an investor is putting money in, most of the money is accounted for going in. They're not going to just say, here's $4 million, use it as you see fit. They know that there's going to be somebody hired in product, 4 engineers hired, an office rented out, office equipment to go with that, maybe a PR firm contracted with somebody to do sales or sales and marketing. So the money doesn't go far. Once the money goes into the firm, the focus is all about growth, getting to that next level while preserving the rest of the capital. And then you'll hear about burn rate, which means how fast are we going through this money. That's a real serious metric that the board looks at very carefully, and therefore so is the CEO. So again, it gets back to, am I going to hire a CFO or am I going to hire a strategic VP or SVP of marketing in the early stages? But I got to keep one eye on the cash register and what's in there and make sure that we're not burning through much cash. This is a more cost-effective way of getting that expertise on board.
So if a startup's hiring needs are predetermined with each phase of funding, is it safe to assume that these hiring managers are chomping at the bit once they get the green light, once that funding goes through? I imagine they're putting some pressure on your team to deliver that top talent as soon as possible. What is that like? And am I right in these assumptions, Colin?
No doubt about it, Patrick. As you probably know, the timelines on full-time roles for highly specialized searches, they're weeks, months, sometimes over a year to really find the right person with the right intangibles. In the interim world or the consulting or fractional worlds, we're looking at days, right? Sometimes a couple of weeks for the entire process. And that's because we have these people already pre-vetted. We know who is available. And it's really a function of reaching out to and vetting specific to the timing and the unique nuances of this company's need. And so, yeah, we can deliver that talent much, much faster, light speed as compared to full-time search.
Okay, well, speaking of time and speed, I want to take this opportunity to shift topics because there's something that I really want to make sure we fit into this podcast. And I think it's something that your audience will benefit from. So I want to give you an opportunity to promote it a bit. And that is Gibson Consultants' Healthcare Musings newsletter. And I got to say, I'm very impressed by this piece that your team puts out. As a marketing professional, I'm a huge believer in creating content which informs and entertains and educates our audiences, not just our current customer base, but prospective clients as well. We want to create content that builds credibility and builds trust, but most importantly, keeps us top of mind always. And your team does such a good job with this. Jim, if you can just introduce us to how this thing got started, what it is, and anything our audience should know about this newsletter.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And it really goes back to why we did it in the first place almost 15 years ago. One of the really interesting things about my business that I've told many people is that we never know where our next search is coming from. We never know where the next client's coming from. And the reason is because if you think about what we do, we'll talk to an executive about our services, and the reaction is most of the time, that's really good. That's really impressive, but I don't have a need. I've got a 7-person team and every seat is filled. So we need to be there top of mind when that one VP walks in and resigns. We want the reaction to be, let me call Gibson. And so that requires us to get in front of them on a regular basis. And that's why we started Healthcare Musings back in whatever it was, 2007, 2008. And it comes out once a month. The subject line used to be a 60-second read, and that's what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a 60-second read. It's not a newsletter. We refer to it as an executive commentary because it's just a single story about a single topic. The majority of the issues are written by a guest author, and they could be heading a software firm, they could be heading a department of a health plan or a department of a hospital. We've had people that were the head of trade organizations. We've had a variety of different types of people. And we asked them to write about something that's of interest to a broad general audience. So we have right now it's about 40,000 people on the distribution list. And they range from C-level to mid-managers, investors, other types of service providers that serve the healthcare industry, salespeople. It's a wide variety of functions within a wide variety of organizations, health plans, health systems and hospitals, just a whole lot of different kinds of companies, software companies, BPO companies. So the thing they have in common is healthcare. So we asked the author to write something that's interesting to people with the one common denominator that they are in healthcare. We tell them we don't want another story about a topic that everybody else is writing about. We'd like it to be either a fresh take on a story people are writing about, or preferably a whole fresh idea. And we love provocative articles, but I tell the potential authors what we're trying to evoke is the reaction when somebody's halfway through the article. Wow, isn't this interesting? I never really would have thought of that. And we achieve it most times. And the authors are great to work with. Sometimes they will write the articles themselves. Sometimes they will have a relationship with a PR firm and they'll write the articles, but they're all over the place with the one common denominator being they're focused on healthcare. And we distribute it monthly at the end of the month through email, and it has a click-through link to our website, and it's posted on a web page on our website. And if you go to our website, there is a couple of drop downs where you can find it. And of course, there's also a sign-up sheet on that page.
Wow. Again, as a marketing professional, I'm really impressed by this, Jim. One, you've been doing it for 15 years consecutively, about 15 years. That's impressive on its own. And the ability to create content that has grown your subscription base to 40,000 individuals. I mean, the power that holds, it's just so incredibly beneficial to your brand. So I'm really happy to hear that your team's been doing this. You're in many ways ahead of the curve. I love that it's a 60-second read, especially in today's digital Twitter society that we live within. Nobody has the attention span for anything longer than that. Why waste your time? And I say that as we record this long podcast, but we'll break this down into small pieces of content, and you can utilize this for microblogs in the future if you wish. I want to go back, though, to the authors, the contributors. I know you said a lot of times they are external contributors. However, I heard you have a very special guest author contributing to your latest piece, none other than Mr. Colin Dittus. Colin, that's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your recent contribution to Healthcare Musings?
Yeah, absolutely. So this month's Healthcare Musings article takes a look at strategies healthcare startups use to engage talent as they scale. And there's a handful of options that are gaining traction in the market, but they're often used without a deliberate, thoughtful approach. And this can be a huge waste of important early capital for a startup. Just one example of this is how a startup engages a consultant or a fractional hire. They'll often select the first option they come across without a whole lot of vetting or asking tough questions or looking at multiple options to make a decision based on the best fit. And consequently, this can often end up costing them a lot more money than they would have spent had they worked with a recruiter to help them through this process to find that best combination of fit and value. That's just a highlight of one example. You can read a lot more detail in the article, which is on our website at Gibson-consultants.com.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to check it out myself now that I've been fully schooled on the healthcare industry and your flexible talent solutions. The healthcare musings should make perfect sense to me after this session. So thank you. Jim, I'm going to bounce it over to you before we wrap this up. If our listeners walk away remembering only one thing, what message do you hope resonates with them the most?
I guess I hope that they would think in terms of this might be something that I haven't considered before, but it makes a whole lot of sense, almost regardless of what my situation is. From the entrepreneur's perspective or from the investor's perspective, if the firm is rapidly growing, we've talked about how there's real good reason to use consultants, interim, fractional kind of people. If they're not having that kind of that good fortune, for example, if they've had to put a hiring freeze in because of real or semi-imaginary concerns, that's a great reason to, the work still has to get done. That's a great reason to use that flexible talent pool. And of course, there are a lot of companies. We have a client that doesn't have the budget to meet the market pricing for the people that they need on a perm basis. It's a perfect solution. Some companies, unfortunately, have gone through layoffs. Unless they're throwing in the towel completely, which they're not, they still need to get the work done. Again, another very cost-effective way for them to do it. And from the individual side, some of them may have been tempted in the past, but as Colin said, afraid to jump in for lack of that soft landing to know that there'll be enough work there. I'd like them to think that this is an option for them.
And if they're ready to learn more or they want to contact you directly, Jim, what is the best way of doing so?
They can contact us. Our website is gibson-consultants.com, and I'm Jim at gibson-consultants.com.
Okay, and Colin, your final thoughts?
Yeah, it's been great engaging both with the clients that we have here at Gibson Consultants and with individuals we've been working for, in some cases, for many years on more flexible offerings. We have a lot of companies that we work with that are really mission driven, have great values, are very dedicated and passionate to making a difference in the lives of consumers and of healthcare providers. And so to be able to impact that and help them reach those needs in a slightly different way than we have in the past, in a more creative, more flexible way, and give them additional options from a talent standpoint is great. And so we're happy to talk with them. They can reach us on our website, gibson-consultants.com. They can email me, cdittus, CDITUS, at gibson-consultants.com, or for individuals who are considering getting into consulting or are already consulting in the healthcare space and looking to pick up some additional projects, we're happy to speak with them.
All right, gentlemen, it's been very insightful. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed this one, but our time ends here. I want to thank our audience for tuning in today. I'm Patrick Convery, Media Director with MRI Network. Keep your nose on the grindstone and have a great day.